This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air. And with Pamela Williams, welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How are you doing tonight or today?
I'm doing fantastic, Phantom. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
Doing great. It's great to talk to people from around the world. We've been doing the podcast since 2016.
Oh, cool.
We're over 1,200 episodes doing them live. And I want to thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
And we've got your link there, Ramon Ministries.
Ramoni
Ministries and
Yeah.
.com. That'll be fully clickable. Even though I got it wrong, you'll just be able to click on it, so you won't have to worry about typing it. And we love talking to people live on the show. And one of the first things we always ask anybody that's on the show, we ask them, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Oh, I love this question. Simply put, what motivates me is, I mean, it was going to sound cheesy, but honestly, I've always had this yearning of wanting to help people. From when I was like bitty in school, I remember one of the kids, Bruno Odonka, this kid at school was like, we were all going around asking what we're going to be. And I said, even back then, I wanted to be a social worker. And he laughed in my face. This was in England. And went, why do you want to be a social worker? You don't make any money. And it didn't even compute. I just was like, but I want to help people. You know what I mean? And that was the irony. Back then, I was like 12. I'm 46 now. And literally, I had to move across the ocean, go through schooling here, graduate with my degrees in psychology and sociology. And I became, by way of group homes, becoming a social worker in the end. So, I mean, it happened, you know what I mean? And now I still help people. So that's really my motivation, to help people.
I think that's a really good thing to be, trying to pay it forward and to help people. Cause I work with a lot of people who are like in the creative space, people who are like in art direction or producers, that we kind of are like teachers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we try to get the best out of anybody. And so like when I've worked with a lot of film directors, I work with people who work with, artists. And when you're in a certain kind of roles there, you're kind of like there in an advisory role and to try to nurture and kind of not to dictate how you should be, but how to make yourself better.
Yeah. More like a guide, isn't it? Like a guide, right? Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, to get the best out of you. I don't want somebody to, now I'm a musician. So do I want somebody to sound like Phantom? No, I want them to sound like them.
Exactly.
And so I want people to be able to self-actualize. So I get that. And I was a sociology major and a political science. I was a double major. So I get what you're. Yeah, it's cool. The liberal arts, I think, it allows you to kind of be able to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
And able to be expansive.
Yes.
So you don't have limited mindset. So you have an expansive mindset. And so that's what I'm about. But I think it's cool that's where you're at, because you want to have everybody able to self-actualize and be able to be the best they can be, or discover the opportunities they don't realize they could have.
Absolutely, like be the best version of themselves. Everyone's got their own unique gifts and the reason why they're coming here. And absolutely, I agree with you with that. That's my role and my job, to help them find that by releasing the emotions that are keeping them stuck from doing that.
Yeah, because there's the idea like emotional intelligence. And I would say in the States, seems like there's a certain group of people that don't seem to have a lot of emotional intelligence right now.
Phantom, are you going there, darling? Are you going? But it's true, though, isn't it?
There was this old movie like Wall Street. It said greed is good. Like the greed is good kind of mindset is kind of back.
Yeah.
This idea, like in this, I was a child of the 70s, so I grew up in the 60s, born in the 60s, child of the 70s.
Right.
And the aspirations, like a Stevie Wonder song, everything's very aspirational, very kind of uplifting. And then somebody's, that's stupid to be like, you're being a sop. It's like you're getting taken advantage of. You can't have that kind of mindset. It's just got to be all about money, power, influence,
greed.
But do you actually care? Like, an artist, we create art, not that we want to make money, not that that's the primary thing we want. It's because we want to put something beautiful into the world.
Exactly.
We want to express our feelings, and it happens to make money. That's cool. But most of the things we work on don't work. They don't initially actually get up there, but it doesn't mean we don't keep on working.
Right, because our intention's pure while we're doing it. Because I'm also an artist as well. I make leather handbags. I haven't been a while actually, but I'm feeling that itch to get back into it. But yeah, I understand that mindset and that space of when I'm creating, I literally just let the leather pieces speak to me. So my bags are centered around it, embracing the beauty and imperfection. And so I use the scars of the leather to create that. And so it's got a lot of right, you know, and so it did get a lot of notoriety locally and stuff, you know, been on a couple of TV appearances and stuff for the message of what I was saying, but it wasn't about making money for me. It was about like this message, and through my art, what I'm trying to create and help people release, you know, like letting go of perfection, because again, in the healing space, perfectionism is what stops us from moving forward.
It's the enemy of creativity. I always find it. Yeah, I mean, I'm very much into the happy accident or into like stream of consciousness, flow state. You know, I'm in my studio right now with all my synthesizers, and I have a bedroom studio, and I just like being able to just go at my keyboards or all my stuff whenever I want.
Right.
And to kind of get into it, like the idea that, you know, the Victorians had this idea of the muse. That the artist can channel that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's inner and it's outer.
Yeah.
Like artists have the ability to take the inner self and the outer world and synthesize it into something new.
Oh gosh, I just got goosebumps when he said that. Yeah, because that literally would be my process, because people would see my bags and they're like, gosh, how do you do it? And I said, look, it's going to sound crazy, but honestly, it's like I let the pieces speak to me. It's like I'm in a different like flow.
Zone. Yeah, you know
what I mean?
Jazz musician. Like if you're a fusion, you know, jazz musician or modal jazz musician, you get into that. Like you've got your 10,000 hours of playing the horn or playing the instrument, and then you get into a group, and there's a lot of stuff that's just intuitive. Miles Davis, some of his greatest albums, he's like he had these great, you know, Coltrane, all these people around, Herbie Hancock. And he had sketches of what he wanted to do, but it wasn't like a classical musician. Everything wasn't written out.
Yeah.
A lot of it is feel. A lot of it is intuitive.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of feeding off each other.
Yeah.
You know, and you feed off what the universe gives you.
Yes.
What your subconscious gives you.
Yes.
You know, and as artists, we're able to break through a wall.
Yeah.
It gives us that permission structure where somebody who says, well, I can never be an artist, because I think anybody could be an artist if they can
So do I.
If they can't get past that wall, then they can't get it. Like, but once you've given yourself the permission structure that I can write the song, I can do the paint stroke, I can be an actor, I can work on film, I can be that somebody creating a bag or creating a piece of art.
Yeah.
That because you gave it to yourself, then now you can get past that. But some people can't get there without help.
Right. Exactly. And that's funny that you say that, because that is part of like my philosophy is that we have to use creativity. And in my coaching, I share that with my clients, because what creativity actually does is help you be present. You can't, when you're in the flow and you're authentically creating, you cannot ruminate. You won't be stuck in your head. Thinking,
that's the
you know what I mean? You're in the flow. So that's why I'm like, look, everybody's creative and you can do something, even if it's scrapbooking, like whatever it is, you just have to find what it is that like drives with your soul. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that what speaks to you, because like you know, every musician, you know, you think about a blues artist, they all kind of they're all stuck on the pentatonic scale, but like it's a form. There's a form, but everybody like Hendrix playing Red House is different than Stevie Ray Vaughan doing it, right? Versus you know, versus some of the great masters doing it, right? And it's like, but it's all kind of the same formula, but how they express it is where the individuality happens. So within different genres of art, you can have forms, but everybody kind of owns their own vision for that form.
Yeah, because it's unique to them. We're all unique, right? We're connected, but we all have our individualism that makes us who we are. So that's why, even though you'll have the form, it will still be different. And I think that's what makes life beautiful. God, wouldn't it be so damn boring if we were all the bloody same?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. You have people who want to just replicate
I
the
know.
same thing over and
Over.
over. They're this in this school, and the problem with, like, social media
Oh,
and the algorithms,
yeah,
the
yeah.
problem I have with it being I'm in an IT, I got a dual hat. Like, I do software design
I
and
hear
I do
you.
art, right?
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
the problem with today with these, like, tech bros is
Mm,
they built these algorithms, they're built on sameness.
yeah.
They
Yeah.
built like,
Yeah.
"Oh, like, this cat video got 1,000,000 views, so you
Yeah.
guys have the same kinda song on it, the
Yeah.
same backgrounds on it, the same stuff on it."
Yeah.
If you so you just keep on replicating the same thing. Art has never been about just replicating the same thing.
No.
And
Because
the
their
problem,
intention's not pure. It's about money.
yeah, they're just
You
trying to
know?
get the most views, the most clicks,
Exactly.
that
It's
doesn't
not.
necessarily represent art.
No. No, it doesn't. Exactly. Exactly.
And I think it's really interesting, because you have your book. I will bring up the title, "How do I find love after heartbreak?" So is that how
Yeah.
you synthesized into your book some of your methodology?
Yeah, it totally is. I had over a decade of experience as a social worker, and then I fused into novel leather and making my handbags and such. But it was around 2018, 2020 that I started to write my book. I finished it in 2020. And during that process of doing so is how I got to learn for myself the 7 key principles that I use in healing and being able to maintain such a positive outlook on life. And that was what helped me develop my theories and methodology, obviously with my background in sociology and psychology as well, and social work. But I wanted to like bring that to the forefront because I know that so many people are suffering emotionally with pain.
Mhm.
And I know for me, like I have a very strong will. And don't get me wrong, like when you're a strong person, I think there's a misconception that strong people don't feel pain or
Oh,
they
yeah.
don't get upset. Like we it just takes us a little bit longer for that elastic to break or
Yeah.
or us to the tree to bend, right?
Yeah, we end up sucking it up too much, Yeah.
Exactly. But so the load we carry is we just carry the load differently. That's all. And so
Yeah.
like I wanted to help other people like release emotional pain because we can do that. We don't have to stay stuck in grief or betrayal or whatever anger, whatever the emotion it is that's really gripping.
Yeah, we got stuck in, like, a bad loop because I think a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of people,
yeah,
they don't
yeah.
progress because
Yes.
they've got some
Yeah.
kind of resentment, they've got this
Mm.
thing they're stuck on,
Or
and I
grieving.
always loved, like, music for me is very cathartic. I
Yes.
can
Yes.
go and
Oh,
take
please.
whatever I'm feeling
Yeah.
and let it flow through my hands into the keys, like, onto my piano or my
Yes.
keyboard or my organ, and I can
Yeah.
just take and the thing about music is because it's, like, sonic and frequency and
Yes, I
rhythm,
was just gonna say
it's
that. I was waiting for you to finish, but you're there, you know it. That
yeah,
sound is healing for that reason, because of the
yeah,
vibration and the frequency. Yeah.
it's a very it's so human. It goes back
Yes.
thousands, to our origins.
Yes.
That before we had language, we had the music.
Yes. Yes.
So music is
Yeah.
so kinda, like, integral to the human spirit,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
when you find a way to be able to express yourself, you can work through emotions, and
Yes.
that's why when people get music, it's like a law of attraction. You just put it out
Mhm.
in the world, and
Mhm.
people, like, will own your composition because
Yes.
they see a certain sound painting in their mind.
Mm.
It's different than what you originally wrote,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's some things there's, like, universal keys that you tap into. Like
Yes.
a key of, like, melancholy or happiness or
Yes. Yeah.
funkiness or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and people find that, and it fits, like, the soundtrack of their life,
Exactly. Well,
and
it's the frequency they're vibing on. They're
yeah,
able to match. It's able to match because we're everything's energy, right? We're all energy, and that's
mhm,
why some songs like you love, and some you're probably like, I don't know, because when you meet a song that vibrates on your frequency, then I mean, not only does
yeah,
it become
good too.
transformative, it's healing, and it's oh my gosh, you know what I
Yeah, there's, like,
mean?
a synergy. There's, like,
Yeah.
this whole thing about, like, being in like, as a musician, I play with, like, all kinds of ideas of, like,
Mm,
harmony,
mhm,
distortion,
mhm,
disharmony,
mm,
discordance,
mm.
noise, and, being able to build things up.
Yeah.
So sometimes in a piece, I might have
Mm.
something that's discordant because
Really?
kind of jarring on purpose.
Yeah.
Kinda like if you think about punk rock or a really
Yeah.
hard, loud guitar
Yeah.
or a jarring, like, drum beat,
Yeah.
Like you do things for impact. Like a
Yes.
filmmaker like makes a certain lens or frame they want you to
Oh,
focus
yeah.
on something.
Yeah.
So sound, we can do what we call sound painting, and we can
Oh,
focus
okay.
on different things that we know are going to drive certain emotional
Mm.
aspects of what we're trying to get across.
Right, right.
And it's very primal because
Yeah,
it's immediate. Like you
yeah.
do music, like you write a book, you got to wait for people to give you the feedback. If I'm a musician,
True.
I'm on stage, I get immediate
You're
feedback
gonna
from
get
the audience,
immediate. Absolutely.
like a comic.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
bombing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like right there in your face. Oh gosh, you're making me want to tap back into my piano. I used to like practice quite a bit and stuff. And
But it's always cool. It's always cool
yeah,
to tap into it. You never know.
yeah,
It'll come to you when you need it. It's like a law
you're
of
right.
attraction. Like
You're right. Yeah,
when you want to bring some kind of art form
yeah,
to your life, you're like,
yeah,
okay, this calls for me to go into film, or
yeah.
I should do this thing as music, or I should do this thing as a poem,
Mm,
or I should write it
mm,
as a book. Like you never know what
you're right.
the
Yeah,
form is, but you could get
it's true.
drawn into it.
Yeah. I write poetry as well, and you're right too. Because for me, what I find now, and I especially after writing my book, because honestly, I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert that talks about like being in the flow and like you being like a channel, and something is just channeling through you as you're writing. Because I'm telling
Mhm.
you, when I was writing my book,
A lot of
even
that.
like some of the people, my aunt was like, "Do you have a mind like an elephant? How do you remember all this stuff?" Especially the stuff when I was in the hospital and dying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, because I wrote my book in the present moment because I wanted people to like be there with me. So when
Mhm.
you read it, it's like you're reading it like you're actually there. And the
Yeah.
feedback I've had from it is says which is what I was trying to accomplish. So to remember certain things, honestly, I'm telling you, it was like I was having help from beyond, because I was like,
The
there's like
muse.
a tunnel.
The idea of the muse is like you're in tune
Honestly.
with this
Oh yeah.
creative kind of spirit
Oh yeah.
that
Because
can pull.
my intention the whole time as I was writing is I want to bring hope. So even when I got to a vulnerable spot and it was like, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to kind of say this. And then I
Mm.
would think, I said, well, what is my intention here? And it's like, I want to bring hope to people who have had to deal with betrayal or abandonment or struggle in their life that's so bad that you don't think you're going to climb out of that hole, but you actually really can climb out of that hole. And so that's what kept me going to be able to do it. But I for sure was in a creative flow. So I've learned from then not to force anything. So when I
Yeah,
write poetry, like I have like over like 15,000 words, like I will just put it into my phone of like little snippets of something
like
that will come to me,
blobs.
and then I would write, yeah, and that I would do. But when it hits me, then I know, and it just flows so quick. And it's like friends would be like, "How did you write that?" And I'm like, "Look, it just came to me, so I did
Well,
it."
flow state is interesting because
Yeah,
flow state is when you don't put that edit, like it's
yeah,
left brain, right brain.
yeah,
And
yeah,
your
yeah,
logical brain wants
yeah.
to
Yes,
slow you down
yeah,
and give you all these doubts of whether or not you
yeah.
should be doing it. Where
Analyzing it and
where the
yeah,
creative kind of side goes and
yeah,
says, why not? Right. And
exactly.
don't even, and once you get into flow, it kind of, you're a channel and
Yes,
and a lot of what is like a lot of our mind is 95% of it subconscious.
yeah,
So I think when you
yeah.
go into flow state,
You
the
tap into
reason
that.
why this stuff is
Mm,
got like form and has like
mhm,
real structure is because it's coming from your subconscious mind.
mhm, mhm.
And that stuff
I
does have
agree.
structure. It
I
came
agree.
from, you
Yeah.
know,
That's the part of our mind that's plugged into the metaphysical world. That's the part that helps us, not just with healing, but information. So it's so important to be clear in your mind so that that's the part that's activated when you need it the most, and
yeah.
not the fear part, the amygdala, what I call the fear center in the left brain, which
Mm.
its job is it's always asking the question, am I safe?
Yeah, like kind of
You know what I mean?
running from the
Right,
wolf,
right,
from the saber tooth, you're
right,
thinking,
right. Am I safe? But sometimes it could be overzealous in wanting to keep the person safe. And the next thing you know, they're comparing, and then they're comparing their life to someone else's, and then they're seeing that person as a threat. When in reality, they're not really a threat. You know what I mean?
yeah, that's that analysis that's going on
Yeah.
today. Like everybody's putting it on the other, this
Oh
kind
gosh.
of global other.
Yeah. Yeah.
and the other is all kinds of things, all kinds of
Yeah.
people, all kinds of
Yeah.
things are the other,
Yeah.
and it's so and that's that wolf at the door.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
other is like you should be more fearful of your inability to actually self-actualize
Yeah.
than the
Yeah.
other,
Yeah.
because you're the one that's actually putting the wall up. The other is not stopping.
Yes. Yeah.
They're over there. They don't even
Yeah.
know who you are.
Exactly.
It's like you're the one that actually has the hang up because you're stuck in
Right. In the
in a
loop.
bad loop.
Yes. Yeah. It's so, honestly so true. Like I feel like what a lot of the problem is in our world today is what I call the sins, and it's CINS. For this reason, comparing, identifying, and non-acceptance. Comparing yourself and your life to someone else's through pictures, when sometimes pictures can say one story and the reality is different behind the scenes, right?
Mhm.
Identifying then with any negative thoughts that come up in your mind and not recognizing that maybe this person is not a threat. Maybe there's something going on in their life that I'm not aware of. So it's not going to affect my life any, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but there's also this lack of empathy
Oh,
and lack
very.
of context. So a
Yes.
lot of
Yeah.
times, like, if you get into the legal aspect, like witnesses who see something. Like I took some
Mhm,
legal
mhm,
classes, like
mhm.
we had a class where they actually acted out something in front of all these kids in the
Yeah.
class.
Uh-huh.
And when they said, "What did you actually see happen?"
I bet
And
you they were
everybody
different.
wrote down something that was totally wrong.
Yeah, I know. I knew you were going to say that because it's
It
like,
was
yeah,
so
yeah.
that because of your perception of what you
Perception.
see with your eyes
Uh-huh.
and something that actually happens right in front of you
Hmm.
is like a lot of the times it's not actually what really happened,
No, it's not.
because
It,
your mind is putting the lens on it
yeah,
because of your pre-decided,
yeah,
your ideas. You have
yeah,
preconceived. We have this already have prejudices built in because part of your brain is trying to keep you safe.
right.
So it's immediately seeing something and saying that's bad. That's
Hmm.
bad. That's bad. That's bad. That's dangerous. That's this. And so you don't even really look at it.
And that's the power right there of emotional intelligence, because when you're emotionally intelligent, you are self-aware, right? You have a self-awareness that says, this is what I feel, this is how I'm feeling, and you release it in a healthy way. And then you're also able to have self-management, which is the other component of just being able to manage your emotions so that they come out like the right emotion, it comes out at the right situation. So like if your pen drops, you're not having a conniption fit, right?
Yeah.
Like if that happens, then it's not because of the pen. There's something else going on underneath that for that to happen. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, because no emotion's wrong. It just is a warning. It's all that is. Then it's like, okay, something else is going on beyond the scenes that you kind of need to get to the bottom of. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's
You
the
have to.
thing. Like, you have to
Yeah.
delve in. Yeah. And
You have to
so,
deal with your triggers. Because
yeah.
a lot of times, we in the U.S. we got all this road rage.
Oh gosh,
Right.
yeah.
And people get triggered from like, and you have no idea what really triggered that person, but you cut
No,
them off, and then suddenly they go to like 1,000.
they.
And they're like, well, I didn't know that was gonna make them go to 1,000, but you didn't understand what was going on before
I
that moment.
it is interesting you say that in it, because there is something about the road that drives people like we've all been there, but we have that chip for us that we understand that, okay, I'm not going to go over the line, because yeah, they've cut me off and it's really peed me off in the moment, and I've expressed that, so I've like let that out so that it's not in me and then it comes out later on, right?
Mhm.
But then you just think to yourself, what is it? Maybe for me, what I'm thinking is because I feel like with cars, they in the blink of an eye, your life can change. Because I've witnessed accidents, I've been
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
them, you know what I mean? And like serious accidents where people I've known have died and things like that. So it's like, I know just a mistake like this can cost somebody their
Really
life
bad.
and
Yeah,
your
it can
life.
be tragic. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not worth rushing. My gosh. Like, if you're going to be late, guess what? If you get into an accident or you're dead, you're really going to be late at that point.
You're
Then
gonna be real late then.
you're real late. So you must just slow down. Oh gosh.
But, like, dealing with heartbreak, like I
Mhm,
said, I deal with, like, things that go on, in my life through music and art,
mhm.
and
Which is a
like,
great way to feel.
you did, you wrote your book, which is art.
Yeah. Thank you.
in itself. But like dealing with heartbreak, some people don't know how to manage it, and they manage it
Mm,
in ways that are more self-destructive,
yeah.
not productive, doesn't move them forward.
Yeah.
So how do you like emotional intelligence maybe kind of define people for people that don't understand what that term means? Maybe talk about like, well, how do you find that? How do you practice that?
Also, yeah, no problem. So, well, the first thing is heartbreak. On my book, How Do I Find Love After Heartbreak? The title straight away lends itself to, oh, it was a romantic breakup. And although that was part of it, that's not really what the book entails and what it means. Heartbreak is suffering a loss. Like anything that brings a loss in your life will break your heart. And then the emotion is grief that you're more or less going to deal with it. So, in terms of grief and emotional intelligence is really crucial because when you're able to recognize how you feel about something, it's easier for you to release it. And when you can do that, it's then easier for you to get on that healing journey. But if you have like an emotional wound, and we've all been there, like for me, when I wrote my book, I got into survival mode. And after I finished writing my book, I saw a therapist because I could recognize for me that I needed to work on personal development for me because look, I was upset at the things that happened, and it worked out for me. But that's because I understood I was in that space where I needed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just as simple of asking yourself, how do I feel? But it sounds loaded, but it's not. But you'll be surprised when you ask somebody that. Most of the time they're like, oh, I'm fine, or well, I don't know. Like they don't really want to go there.
Yeah,
You know
they
what I
want
mean?
to be there.
They
They
don't
don't want
want
to
to
be
be there.
vulnerable. They don't want to be vulnerable.
They
Most
don't.
people don't want
Exactly. That's exactly. They don't want to be vulnerable. But you could that is one step you can take to practicing being self-aware. Because that's all emotional intelligence really is, being self-aware, being able to manage your emotions. Because when you can do that, it helps foster in empathy. Because then you have an understanding when you're unpacking and dealing with your own emotions, how they affect other people and maybe what somebody else is going through in their life, right? So it
to. Mhm.
fosters that socially. And then also it helps you in managing your relationships because it's hard to have a relationship or a connection with somebody who is unable to manage their emotions and they fly off the handle or they project how they feel onto you, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
when you're aware of your emotions, you're less likely to do that.
Yeah, less projection because a lot of
Yeah.
times, that's we're dealing with a very projected society.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Because everybody's projecting like their issues on
Mm,
the other a lot of
mhm,
times,
mhm,
and it's
mhm.
like this is global blaming
Yeah, yeah,
for everything, and so
yes,
the immediate solution is to not look in like, I had always like the idea of the looking glass self,
yeah,
kind of from Victorian
yes,
concept. You see
yes,
in a lot of like Victorian poetry,
yes.
Wordsworth and
Yes,
all
I
Tennyson and
like
all
you,
that stuff.
Phantom. I like you.
And
Yes,
I was
yes,
always well, I'm a songwriter, so like poetry was
yeah,
immediately appealing to me because
yeah.
you
Because it
start with a
is.
poem and then you become you turn it into a song.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and a lot of times I started with poetry because I had this love for the Harlem Renaissance and had love for the
Mhm,
Victorian poets and beat poetry and
mhm,
stuff coming out of the
yeah,
60s. And it's like this is a way to express a point of view
yes,
and feeling
yeah.
and,
Releasing your emotions.
release it. And then when
Yeah.
you put it to music, then it
Oh,
gets a whole nother level.
yes.
But the idea is that you could work through things.
Yeah.
And then when
Exactly.
you work with those things, you can see like, oh, maybe this wasn't I'm not the only one in the world that could feel like this.
Yes.
And I
You're
think
not
a lot of
alone.
people maybe feel like they're the only one
Yeah.
that feels something. And then when you are willing to be more vulnerable and self, that looking glass review
Yeah.
of what's going on,
Yeah.
then you say, whoa, there's more going on in common with humanity here
Yes.
than it's not just me.
Yes.
This is a global theme.
That's exactly so powerful. And it's funny because that's a theme that I touch on in my book too, because of the fact that we tend to go into a space where we think that we're the only one going through it. And I will never forget my mom at the time, you know, my boyfriend left 10 weeks before I was due to give birth, but I was sick with preeclampsia when he did it. So, I mean, I was like in a really bad spot. And she said to me, I'll never forget her words. She said, you're not the first and you won't be the last. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And it, you know, there was something about it that helped me kind of like get a bit on track.
Yeah,
kind of get out of that. Yeah, get out of that hole. Because my big thing is like, how am I going to do it all? Like, he's gone. I don't care about him. But I was like, man, how am I going to do all of this?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to put on somebody. It's like I'm a cancer survivor. Age 27, I went through a level 3 sarcoma. But you know, it was interesting because you know, at age 27, you get something like that, and you're around a lot of young people. And what I found was really interesting, there were young people around me that dropped off because they couldn't deal with that mortality. And because like at that age, you don't want to be thinking about that. So some people could, like some of my friends, I didn't realize that they would be there.
Yeah.
And people I expected to be there, they disappeared.
Yeah.
And it's like because people like how they see things.
Yes.
There were a lot of people that actually took that and they internalized it and they couldn't handle it and they dropped off.
They didn't want to face it themselves. But that's the thing. There's the notion of impermanence, and I lived by that in my life through my bags. I think helped me with that, where nothing is going to stay forever. Everything ends. I mean, and once you understand that concept, I think you show up more, and there's more of a gratitude and a gratefulness for what you have and people that you have in your life, because you know it's going to end at some point. Now, you don't hang your hat on that, obviously, but just understanding that makes you put more energy into being with the people that fill your cup. You know what I mean? Doing the things in life that really bring you joy and that you want to bring joy to other people. Being present, exactly. Taking care of things. You know what I mean? These little things, because you know, look, at one point it's going to end. But there's a lot of people that don't want to think of that for that notion. They don't want to think of anything ending. And it's like, look, this is life. What begins will end, but there really isn't an ending, because all that signifies is just a new beginning.
With a new fate. Well, I'm a Buddhist. We kind of believe that we'll go to the next life.
Yeah.
And so, like, if I didn't get so far in this life, and the next one I got another shot.
Right.
But you know, some people don't think that way because they have a different mindset. But that if you hang everything on what happened in the past,
oh my gosh,
or put everything into the future. You know, like Herbie Hancock had this thing where he was working with Miles Davis, and they were playing together, and he hit the wrong note. And Miles Davis actually just adapted his next note to match his note.
Oh, and really? That's genius.
It taught him that, like, there's no bad note, there's an opportunity.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And more that you can live in the presence and not be totally wedded to the actual music on the page. That you could actually let it live and breathe. And every time you play that piece, it could be different. And it doesn't have to be the same. And making it the same is not necessarily serving the music.
Yeah, exactly. 110% agree with you. Exactly. Like, there is no such thing to me as failure, because it just is saying you go in a different direction. Like, my whole bags, the whole concept of how they actually started, I was trying to cut the pieces straight, especially on the flaps. Like, I was trying to cut them straight, perfect straight, and I couldn't, because there's some people that can cut straight, but I couldn't. And it began to really frustrate me, right? And then all of a sudden, I just took a step back and I looked at a piece and I thought, you know what, sod it. I'm not going to cut this piece. I'm just going to work with it and see what happens. And literally, that's how it developed. I couldn't cut a piece straight, and instead I chose to work with the edges and have the edges
be there. Unique. Everything's a unique piece.
Oh, everything is unique. Everything's unique.
Well, that's a niche, because that's the whole thing. Like in experimental and jazz and fusion, is the idea that we can create a piece of work that evolves or is never ever, you know, when we go to play, it's never going to exactly be what we put down, like, you know, on tape. And it's not supposed to be.
Right. Right.
And that's the the fun in it to me as a musician is like if I wanted to be a classical musician playing Bach all the time, and now
Mhm.
you can do that and you can have a director orchestration and they can decide to emphasize different things and you
Mhm.
can play with the emphasis, but
Mhm.
it's still Bach. It's still
Right.
that piece.
Right.
In experimental music or fusion, you can actually go in a different direction than what you wrote.
Mm.
And I like
This
that
is more
because
create. That's creation, though.
yeah, that's a
You know,
different
being
thing.
able to change on the flow like that, that to me is true creation. Like when it's rigid, you can't be creative.
Yeah,
There's, to me, there's no limits. When you put a limit on being creative, then I just don't know how it's going to come out authentic. You might get something, but you'll get
yeah,
something more if it's limitless when you do it.
yeah, you have less of a
Mm.
restraint.
Yeah,
You have a wide open canvas and you can go everywhere.
yeah, exactly.
Some people like to play with constraints
Yeah,
because, like, if I'm constrained, then I try to be able to do what I can do within that constrained
yeah,
space.
yeah.
And there's sometimes you can be very innovative if you think about it, but you don't have as much room.
No,
And I like to have as much room as possible.
yeah.
And I
Me
think,
too. I'm
uh,
free. I'm about freedom.
yeah, and people put the glass ceiling on themselves.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
say what they can't do. I'm not good at this. I can never do that.
yeah.
And then immediately they just like, okay, well, you're never gonna get there.
Yep.
You're never gonna try to get there because you're already saying you can't do it.
And that's the other part of emotional intelligence I actually wanted to touch upon as well, and something that I teach in my coaching, and that's the mindset portion of it. Like the way we think influences the way that we feel, which then influences the way that we behave. They're all connected. Again, the way we think influences the way that we feel, which then influences the way that we behave. And a lot of
Mm,
the problems that we have would be people when they get into a situation where they're unable to track their thoughts before action. It
mm,
typically is thought, action, consequence, right? Or problem. And when you're able to track your thoughts before you act, you gain clarity. You have clarity at that point. And so mindset, I cannot emphasize, is so important to being emotionally intelligent because, like I said, the way you think influences the way that you feel, which influences the way that you behave.
yeah, 'cause you think about in sociology, you get the sociology of the crowd.
Yeah. Oh,
Right,
yeah. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
in that crowd and the
Group
first
think.
group think and the
Yeah.
first person in that crowd throws the rock. Now, nobody thought they were gonna throw the rock or the
Right.
brick, but as soon as one person does it, it starts to trigger, like, there's a
Yeah.
permission structure, and I did not
Yes.
come here to do that,
Yes.
and then
But
when you ask them after, it's like, "Well, I never thought I was gonna do that," but then they
right.
kinda lose their own self-control that gets into the group mind,
Exactly.
and then
Yeah.
they follow whatever is happening. You could go as far as, like, a lynching, a
Yes.
murder,
Yes.
a
Yeah.
burning, or arson, like,
A
you didn't
race
come
or
there to do
something.
that.
Oh gosh.
You
Yeah.
didn't go there to do that,
No.
but then you got caught up in it, and then you have the people who can control how much they're gonna get influenced by the group thing,
Right.
is a matter of level of maturity.
Right, exactly. Because that won't happen. Because yeah, it is difficult to go against a group. But if you are confident in yourself, you will go against the group. Because like for me, I'm like, I ain't gonna do it. But that's just me. And it's taken me a long time to get to this position and point in my life where I'm like, well, I'm gonna do that. That's not what I want to, you know what I mean? But it
Yeah.
is so easy when you're part of a group to go along with what's going on through groupthink because you're like, oh, gosh, if I step out, how am I going to look? Am I going to be disowned? You know what I mean? You start thinking this way
Yeah,
again.
and now we got people that are in these, like, virtual digital groups
Yeah,
that
oh,
have
no.
anonymity, and
Yeah,
then they do things that are very
mm,
much like the riot kinda crowd that they wouldn't do.
yeah,
They go
yeah,
send threats to judges.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
They go do they get egged on, they do things that normally they wouldn't, but because of
yeah.
anonymity and because of digital kinda fog,
Yes,
they can get pulled into, like, a group riot think
yeah,
and do things that
yeah.
they would
Mob mentality.
yeah, they wouldn't
Yeah,
have done, and it becomes very destructive, and they can do it at a microcosm level, and they can do it at a macrocosm level. And it's like, it's just people. I think there needs to be more self-analysis and more understanding of like the role. Like there's so much like on the individual. Like there's so many people are so into individualism
Yeah, yeah.
without
You're
thinking
selfish.
without thinking about community.
I know. I'm about simplicity. Like I'm like really simple. So I'm like, yeah, you're right in what you're saying. It's the same thing that we're saying, but my gosh, you know what? People are more selfish now because we're disconnected. When you're connected to not just other people, but something greater than yourself, and to me, that person's Jesus. It's easier to treat somebody without empathy. It's easier because you're just focused on making sure that your bubble and yourself are all right. So therefore, you're not thinking about how it's going to impact someone else's life. And I think that is so prevalent in our world today because there's too much emphasis on the outside and looking at the outside when we have to take the time to go inside. And that, I must say, is the fun part of my job and what I do as an emotional intelligence coach is helping my clients build a self-care routine that encompasses the body, the mind, and the soul that helps them become more present, become happy, become more engaging, right? And recognize these emotions when they come up in real time so that they can deal with it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, because you don't want to build up that like that whole people build up this list of grievances.
oh yeah.
And then they get to start to build and build and build until they get to that rage kind of, the road rage moment.
Yeah.
That we get in America, we get these moments of like people just go crazy at the post office, crazy at the school, crazy
People
at
are
the shopping
shooting
mall.
from cars now. They
I
get
know.
upset and you're just like, my God, people, come
Yeah,
on.
there's no connection. It's like,
No.
would you want that to happen to your family?
Right,
Would you want that happen to you?
right,
Whether you have so much rage and everybody's got to pay for your
right.
inconvenient
Yeah,
feelings,
yeah,
your bad loop that you can't get out of, and you're just on this bad trip that
yeah.
like everybody else has to suffer from your bad trip.
That's That's the problem when there's a lack of empathy. That's exactly the kind of mindset that people have. It's like, hurt people hurt people.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And they do, sadly.
Yeah, it's at the microcosm level, like at a relationship, you
Yeah,
can deal with like, domestic situation, you get narcissist or you get somebody
yeah,
that didn't know how to actually deal with other people.
yeah, yeah,
They had
exactly.
parents that didn't really teach them how to deal with other
Yes,
people,
yeah,
and they just, are totally, you know, focused on this narcissistic mindset,
yeah.
and they these
Me, me,
bad
me.
loops,
Hmm.
and they just don't realize that going for help is okay because they've been told they gotta suck it up, that they can't go for help because it makes them
Mm.
weak, and so you get a lot of people who won't even seek aid because they've been put on this trajectory that's not that shows that you're not,
And it's the opposite.
yeah,
You're,
they're just
you're
showing up.
that strength. That strength to admit that you mean I was saying that to my son earlier today before he went off to work and stuff. We were having a conversation about something. What were we even talking about? And I said, you know what, you showed great strength there, son, to admit, oh, that's right, he's having his wisdom teeth taken out tomorrow.
Oh, yeah,
And I know. And I asked him, if he was nervous and stuff, and he looked at me, and he went, yeah, I kind of am. And I said, well, I go, you'd be crazy not to be. I go,
yeah,
you've never had that. You've never had been put under. So I was like, I'd be thinking, I'm like, you know what I mean? And I said, it took courage to do that. And I'm proud of you for doing that. I said, it took great strength.
yeah,
Because
that's something we gotta teach people,
yes,
especially, like, a lot of young men today,
yes,
there's this crisis with young men, and I'm like, "Okay, wait a minute."
there is.
Like, they have these really bad ideas being pushed by these bros, these,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
these
yeah,
all these tech bros,
yeah,
podcast bros, whatever
yeah.
bro, and it's like you guys have, like, there was the age of the Enlightenment,
Mm,
and the people in the '60s caring about the world, joining the Peace Corps. because
Mm.
Kennedy said to go join the Peace Corps. What could you do for your country? People
Yeah.
felt that they should go do something. Now you think it's cool to use the R word, the F word, the N word,
Right.
to demean women.
Right.
That makes
Oh,
you stronger. Like where Kennedy was saying, "What could you do for your country?" And you think it's good to do that.
I know
What
it's,
what
you
is
know,
that?
I think, I mean, like I said, you said you were born in the 60s, grew up obviously 70s. I was born in the 70s and then 80s. And I just to me from remembering, and even in the 90s, remembering this, that there used to be more of an avenue for people who were like hands-on, right? Because
Mhm.
yeah, you've got your scholars and people who are going to go off to university, and then you've got your hands-on. Like my older brother was a mechanic.
Yeah,
That
that
was
kind of
his. He didn't go.
tradesman.
Yeah, he's a tradesman. And my middle brother, he went to university, so we would jokingly tease him and be like, the nerd and that.
Yeah.
And then I worked. This was in London. I was like, I ain't doing that. But then I ended up coming here and doing that, which I'm glad I did. But my whole point was there was avenues from a trade standpoint.
Yeah.
Young men and young women who maybe didn't have an avenue as a scholar, but they knew they could do something hands-on.
You could do something that you could actually buy a house, that you could end up
Yes.
buying a boat, and,
Yeah.
it really became I don't know, I wanna get into politics, but the idea of the globalization, kinda NAFTA, in the US, what happened is
Mm,
a lot of the trades work got shifted out of the US,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
then they never really retrained people, and
Right.
so a lot of the IT job I happen to be in IT, and I went to a
Mhm.
good college, and
Mhm.
I was able to get into it.
Right.
But if you're that tradesperson or
Right.
that person that worked in the mill or the factory,
Right.
you lost that opportunity. They never
Right.
retrained you. They never thought that they
Right.
should do it. And so you got a whole class of people that have all these resentments
Mhm.
and no way to get they
Yeah.
used to be able to buy a house, buy a
Yeah.
boat, buy a snowmobile, buy a bike, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Now they living in a trailer park or they're living
Yes.
in Section 8
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
don't feel like they're being listened to, and I understand where
Yes.
the rage is
Yeah.
coming from.
So exactly. So do I, because like I said before, hurt people hurt people. And I know like attracts like. And when people are in this swell of grievance, I immediately know there is pain that they're dealing with. And this for them is the best way to release it. It's not obviously the best way because the core wound is still there, but they just feel like they're not being heard, they're not being seen, and they're not being understood. So then they become part of something that
Yeah,
maybe isn't a
they
good
get
thing,
taken
right?
advantage of by,
Right,
demagogues.
right,
Eh,
right,
yes, that's
right.
kinda like the age-old pattern. I mean, I
Right.
studied a lot of, political science and
Yeah,
history,
yeah,
and we've
yeah,
seen
yeah.
a lot of things that happened in the '30s
Yeah, history is repeating itself.
is
There's
kinda
no doubt
happening
about it.
again. Like, we're seeing these, like, movements that are taking advantage of the hurt people.
Yeah.
So these
Yes.
hurt people that don't know how to
The power.
self-actualize, and they're being manipulated like,
Yeah.
Stalin and Hitler and,
Yes.
Mussolini
Yeah.
manipulated. We're getting the same kind of behaviors, and the people don't read the history, don't learn from the history, and are doomed to kinda repeat the history if you don't
Exactly.
actually learn.
Right. And which what makes history so important. You know what I mean? Like history is there to teach us. Let's not make this mistake again. There's a different path that we can follow that could be a lot better.
Yeah,
That's the
everybody's so
beauty of history.
tied to their social media, watching
Right.
playing video games, watching TikTok videos, and like the level of competency is like gotten to the
Mhm.
point where people used to, my generation, we would read 200,
Yeah.
300,000 word books.
Yes. Yeah.
Count, now
And
you got
write
people saying
letters.
people can't read more than 60,000 words, right?
Right.
They can't watch
Right.
more than 15 seconds, 30 seconds of a TikTok,
I'm
you
not
know,
even on that stuff. I'm not on
but
TikTok. I'm not honestly. I'm for the last 5 years. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and Alignable because I have to have some type of digital input because of
mhm.
the way the world we live in today. But everything else, no. But like I said, this is what I teach, and I practice
Yeah,
what I teach and preach. For
but
me,
it's
you
so
know,
frustrating
my
that people
emotional
don't
well-being.
have the patience to, like, read Moby Dick, to read
Mhm. It's
Invisible
true.
Man, to actually go and read W.B. Du Bois, right?
Mm,
Read Francis Fanon. The kids, what they won't read,
yeah.
and so, like, how you going to learn is like the core thing for you to understand something is to read like something like Wretched of the Earth, or or to read a really classic book that tells you teaches a lesson. They even read like Othello or Shakespeare, like to get, even though like, oh, it's hard to read. Yeah, it's hard to read, but you can learn something from that if you actually. And I kind of went through the liberal education that taught me how to read things like that.
Yeah.
And people are saying, well, it's science and the math. Well, the science and math is important, and I'm in science and math.
And creativity is just as important to me.
Yeah, I think you need to learn the arts.
Yes,
the arts are just as important, and to only focus on the logic without the arts gives you like half a soul. You don't have the full capability to be like, I think what you're saying with emotional intelligence. If you don't get somebody to get into the softer thing, the arts, and all they get is the math and the science, and they look at the spreadsheet and they only look for things that have numbers. They don't understand the value of any of those numbers.
Exactly. That's a good enough. Yeah, it's very, very true. Exactly. That's the thing. We have two hemispheres of our brain for a reason, and they're both as vital. And yes, the left one does want to dominate and boss us around, but no, you have to use that right one, the whole picture, because you need to see the whole picture, just like you need to see the little things within that picture that make up the whole picture. But if you just look at the little things, then you're going to just have a narrow train of thought and a narrow mindset. But when you're able to see the little things and the big picture of that, my gosh,
it's expansive. My mantra is expansive, to be able to, even if you don't like something, you should always check something out. You should always look at, that kind of idea, the Socratic method, or being able to argue critical thinking, argue a point, and not just be wedded to one school of thought.
Yeah.
The whole idea is to like challenge yourself.
Exactly.
So if you challenge your preconceptions.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to stay in their preconceptions.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Because I think most people are just stuck with wanting to be right. And when you're stuck with wanting to be right and your opinion being right, you're less likely to listen to other people. And I think that's the problem that we have. And it's great. Yeah, everybody has their opinion, but not everybody needs to share the opinion necessarily. It's the other thing. But I think social media has perpetuated that, because people just really are just used to just saying what they want.
Well, and then the problem is if you get a million views on an opinion that's not really that's not learned. It's not well thought out.
Right.
It gets value. Because of the number.
Right.
But not value because it actually has a good critique or a good thing to say. It just has value because it's become monetized, and really is kind of just not. It's kind of like junk food knowledge.
Right. But the component with that too is it's bringing somebody their self-worth, which that's sad, right? Because you can only get your self-worth from two avenues, external or internal. And internal is the way to go. When you go inside and you plug into something beyond, you'll always have power and energy then. But when your source of self-worth is dominance, adulation, status, things, that's the problem. And adulation is a big problem, and that's part of the social. The likes and it releases.
It gets kind of very shallow.
Right. But chemically, it will release dopamine and stuff, right?
It'll make you like you'll get addicted to repeating the thing that got you the numbers.
Right.
And then that doesn't get anybody any value.
Doesn't do it. It just doesn't. So
I want to. We're probably at the close of our conversation today, but because of the time constraint. But I wanted to mention RamoniMinistries.com, and if people click on that, what do they find there?
They will go to my website. You will there's resources that can help you with emotional intelligence and being able to release any wounds that you have. And also there's a link to work with me. So yes, head over to my website and you have a look there. And I'd love to carry on that conversation with you.
And that's fully clickable. We've been live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We'll be on other channels like Spotify podcast, Amazon, Apple Podcast. iHeartRadio, many other channels. We're going to create a landing page for you guys to check out whatever channel you want to.
Thank you.
It will be out in the world. in that way. So I want to thank you again for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Phantom. Great conversation. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.